3 bone-chilling true camping horror tales that haunt you long after midnight as dark shadows crept through the towering pines. 3 unsuspecting campers settled into their cozy circle, oblivious to the horrors that lurked beneath the moonlit canopy. It was supposed to be a fun getaway, but in mere hours, laughter would turn to screams, and the woods would whisper secrets that no one would dare to repeat. Legends carved into the bark of ancient trees spoke of dread unspeakable things that gnawed at the edges of sanity, twisting the very air until it became thick with fear. The first sign of trouble came when the wind picked up, rustling the leaves like hushed whispers exchanging secrets. Sat in their mismatched camping chairs, the group found themselves unnervingly quiet. Suddenly, a low growl echoed from the depths of the forest. It wasn't the usual rustle of wildlife. No, this was different, deep, guttural, primal. Faces turned pale as hearts raced, their instincts screaming at them to run. Jack, the brave one, chuckled to mask his fear, but even his laugh held a tremor. "Probably just a wolf or something," he said, though his wide eyes betrayed him. Then Sarah noticed something glinting under a nearby bush. Curiosity piqued, she walked closer. A chill coursed through her as she uncovered a bloodied camping mat, the fabric stained dark and twisted, beckoning ominously. The others rushed over, unease written all over their faces. "Did someone else camp here?" asked Mark, pushing back the rising panic. But no answer came from the wild, just the now louder, unsettling growl, echoing closer, like a drum thrumming a warning of dread. Before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. Just as they huddled together, the unmistakable crack of a twig echoed from deeper in the forest, shattering the fragile silence. Eyes widened, breaths held what was out there. The ground vibrated with a low rumble, as if the very earth itself was warning them, urging them to flee before it was too late. Then, through the thick shadows, a figure emerged, silhouetted by the moonlight, tall, with an elongated shape that twisted unnaturally. Fear swept over them, and they took a step back in unison, hearts pounding with the weight of terror. Was it a bear? A ghost? Their guilty conscience in the face of the unknown? No one could tell, and the question hung heavy in the air like a fog. In that moment, they gazed into the abyss of fear, wrestling with the knowledge that they had ventured too far into what should never be disturbed. And as they stood frozen, the figure froze too, staring back, its intentions unreadable, its breathing a chilling echo that would mark their souls long after they left these woods. What happened next? What happened when fear met whatever haunted those shadows? The night had just begun. The air thickened, pressing down on them like an unseen weight. Jack, stricken with a sudden resolve, broke the silence. "We need to light the fire. Now." He scrambled for the matches, fumbling in the dark, his hands shaking. Mark still stared into the shadows where the figure lingered. "Wait. Don't move," he hissed, panic seeping through every word. "What if it's watching us?" Sarah felt her heart race, a primal instinct firing within her. "We can't just sit here," she snapped, glancing at the encroaching darkness, willing it to retreat. "We have to leave." But the ground beneath them trembled again, punctuating her words with an ominous beat. A resolve wrapped itself around Jack's spine. He struck a match, and the tiny flame flickered to life, momentarily illuminating their faces, revealing the terror etched in their features. The fire blazed to life, its warmth offering a thin veil of comfort. But the figure remained, weaving in and out of sight, like smoke or a nightmare refusing to fade. Jack squinted into the darkness as if he could somehow wish the shape into visibility. "It's not a bear or anything we know. It's different." That was all it took. The growl came again, this time closer, hungry. They all jumped, the fire crackling, sending sparks spiraling into the night. "Grab something!" Mark shouted, his voice raw with urgency. They fumbled around, clutching anything they could find: flashlights, camp gear, and branches. "No, listen," Sarah said, a tremor in her voice. The growling had stopped, replaced by a sound that struck deeper fear into their hearts: a woman's voice weeping, just beyond the trees. The sobs were horrifying, dripping with anguish that pierced the night air like a blade. "Is that?" Jack began, but the words fell away. None dared voice the idea blossoming in the back of their minds. "Let us just get out of here," Mark pleaded, glancing at the thick blackness beyond their meager circle of light. In a moment of unified terror, they turned toward their car, but as they took a step, the ground erupted with a horrible skittering sound, the leaves rustling violently, as if something was darting among them. Heartbeats surged, their breaths quickened. "Over there." Sarah pointed, her voice trembling. Something moved in the shadows, a flash of white against the black, a face, pale as bone, eyes glinting like shards of glass. They stumbled back, huddling together, hearts racing as the figure shifted closer, revealing itself to be a child, dressed in tattered clothing, covered in dirt and grime, crying silently for help. "Help him," Jack urged, his own courage faltering as the child's expression twisted into something haunting, an echo of despair that left them reeling. "What if it's a trick?" Mark whispered, fear cutting through him. "But what if it's not?" Sarah countered, her voice shaking. They were caught in a storm of moral conflict: help or flee. The weight of a decision pressed on them like an anvil. Then, without warning, the child's gaze turned toward the woods again, the sound of a growl rumbling louder. Instinct surged: either they would be drawn into the nightmare or they would lose themselves forever in these cursed woods. As if summoned by the child's despair, shadows shifted again, creeping closer, wrapping around the campers like icy fingers of doom. Then, through the chaos, came a chilling realization: the child was not alone. Darkness loomed, and their decision hung in the air like an impending storm. Would they dive deeper into the terror, or would they find a way to escape? The night was far from over, and time was running out. The child's eyes seemed to absorb the pale light of the flickering fire, reflecting an eerie mix of fear and desperation. Jack felt his heart constrict as he gazed into the depths of that tiny face. "What do we do?" he whispered, the tremor in his voice betraying his bravado. "What if it's a trap?" Mark repeated, his voice a shaky echo of his own doubt. They were paralyzed, caught between the instinct to protect and the primal urge to escape whatever nightmare had found them. Just then, the child flinched, turning abruptly to peer deeper into the woods, and for a split second, both Jack and Sarah followed the child's gaze. A second shape emerged, larger and more ominous than the first. It lingered for a moment, hesitating at the edge of their firelight as if gauging its targets. "Is that?" Sarah faltered, scrambling for words as something dark flickered in and out of the shadows. The growl that rumbled from the depths of the trees was deeper, more menacing, causing the very ground beneath them to vibrate. "It's trying to lure us in," Mark said, panic rising in his chest. "We can't trust it. We need to go." "No. We can't just leave it," Jack shouted, a defiance surging through him. Despite his fear, the pull of empathy was stronger. He glanced at the child, who had resumed crying softly, the sound mingling with the growls that reverberated in the dark. But before they could argue further, another sound broke through, a piercing scream, feminine, desperate, echoing off the trees like a death knell. The child whimpered and stepped forward, reaching out a hand toward the darkness. "Help her," it urged, its voice a haunting whisper barely rising above the crackling fire. Jack hesitated, his heart thundering painfully in his ears. He could feel Sarah's grip on his arm tighten, pulling him back as if trying to anchor him to reason. "We can't go in there. It's not safe," she cried, her eyes wide with terror. But that call for help so raw, so genuine, stirred something deep within him. "I have to try," he said, his resolve hardening into a fragile determination. "Jack, don't." Mark lunged forward, but Jack stepped away from the fire's warmth, drawn into the weight of the shadows. As he approached the darkness, the atmosphere shifted. The air was charged, static, as if the very trees were whispering secrets meant only for the shadows. The child dared to step closer to him, its hands still outstretched, inviting yet unsettling. Suddenly, a harsh rustling erupted from the trees, and the shadows pulsed. Jack turned back. He realized in horror that they were no longer alone. Dark forms skittered among the trunks, moving swiftly, their shapes shrouded in mystery and malevolence. His pulse quickened. "We have to get back," he yelled. Mark and Sarah joined him, fear painting their faces as they huddled together, the child's small frame trembling behind them. But the growls had transformed into an angry chorus. The sounds echoed around them, a cacophony closing in, overshadowing the child's cries. In a desperate attempt to retreat, Jack stumbled back, but the ground beneath him was suddenly snatched away, a hidden pit obscured by dirt and foliage. He fell, the air rushing from his lungs as darkness swallowed him whole. "Jack!" The scream ripped through the night, piercing through the veil of horror draping over them. Mark lunged forward to help, but Sarah seized his arm, her eyes wide with disbelief. "What are we doing?" "We can't," but it was too late. The moment hung in the balance, as Jack vanished from sight, leaving nothing but echoing terror behind him. As the shadows rippled, the child's gaze met Sarah's, vacant yet somehow pleading. "You have to help him." And just in that moment, the moon broke through the dense clouds, illuminating the clearing in a ghostly glow. They could now see what lay deeper in the forest, figures twisted into grotesque shapes, their intentions becoming all too clear. An unsettling thought crept into Sarah's mind: what if saving one would lead to the loss of many? The eyes of the shadows glimmered like hungry stars, watching, waiting. The night was not finished with them yet. Jack gasped as he hit the bottom of the pit, his breath stolen by the shock of the fall. For a moment, lost in the darkness, he felt like the ground itself had swallowed him whole. Panic surged within him, a molten mix of fear and dread, suffocating him. He struggled against the cold soil that clung to him, the weight of the night pressing down. "Jack!" The distant voice was a thin thread, just out of reach. He swallowed hard, pushing himself to sit up. The deep growls hadn't stopped, they rippled through the air like low thunder, ominous and unyielding. His surroundings were dim and muffled, the faint light from above casting ghostly shapes on the walls of the pit. As his eyes adjusted, he saw what lay ahead: a tunnel, dark and narrow, crawling deeper into the earth. An uneasy thought wormed its way into his mind. What if he wasn't alone down here, above? The sounds of frantic shouting grew muffled as Mark and Sarah struggled to make sense of their new reality. Jack pressed his palm flat against the ground, a desperate bid to steady himself. "I'm okay," he called out, though the words felt hollow against the chaos. The response was immediate: a crack of branches, then silence. Something above was moving. Something not human. A chill seeped through Jack's bones as he heard a rustling, echoing softly in the earth, inching closer. Awareness flooded back. He couldn't just stay put. Whatever was lurking above, the shadows were likely seeking him out now. He needed to move, find a way out. He stood up cautiously, every nerve in his body alight with fear, the growls morphing into a maddening symphony of sound. His heart raced. He needed to find a way to escape before what was up there found him here alone, with only darkness ahead. Jack stepped into the mouth of the tunnel. The air was thick, musty, making each breath an effort. He moved forward, fighting the urge to turn back at the sound of deep thrumming that seemed to pulse from the very walls of the tunnel. Hope flickered like a candle in the dark. He thought of Sarah and Mark. Where were they now? Were they trying to find him, or had the horrors of the night already taken them? He had to find a way back, he had to help them. The weight of responsibility pressed down, urging him forward, further into the tunnel. Jack stumbled over uneven ground. The dim light behind him dimmed until darkness enveloped him completely. He paused, breathing heavily, straining his ears. A scuttling noise echoed softly behind him. A shiver ran down his spine. He forced himself to keep moving. With each step, the ground turned from dirt to something slick and slimy, the smell of decay sharp in his nostrils. It felt as though the earth itself was alive, echoing the fears of those that had walked before, but then a glimmer of light. Up ahead, a faint illumination beckoned. Jack's heart leaped, pushing him forward, but the instant he set foot towards it, the sound of scraping grew louder, more aggressive. He turned back, but the tunnel was filling with shadows. "Help!" he cried, desperation spilling out. A piercing howl cut through everything, reverberating off the walls like a thunderclap. Jack's breath hitched in his throat. The shadows were closing in, racing through the dark like water down a drain. He had moments left. Would he find salvation in the light ahead, or would it consume him? As he bolted toward the hazy glow, he never considered what might lie beyond it. Above ground, Mark and Sarah exchanged desperate glances. They could still hear Jack, but the howls grew louder, closer. "We have to go down there," Mark urged, clutching Sarah's arm. "He needs us." But as they approached the pit, the ground rumbled beneath them, and fresh terror flashed in Sarah's eyes. "What if we can't come back?" she whispered. The decision loomed like a shadow hanging over them both. And just as they prepared to dive into the unknown, the forest erupted with fearful cries. What lay hidden in the darkness began to make itself known. The night was far from over. Jack sprinted toward the light, his heart pounding in his chest like a war drum. Behind him, the shadows hissed, scratching and scraping as they closed in. The harsh adrenaline coursing through his veins overshadowed the sickening smell of rot that hung in the air. What was chasing him? The thought paralyzed him, but there was no time for questions. The glowing spot grew larger, revealing its source, a cracked slab of stone, glowing with an otherworldly hue. It pulsed rhythmically, like a heartbeat. He could hardly believe his eyes. Could this be the relief he sought, or a trap set by the creatures lurking behind him? With a final burst of energy, he lunged at the stone, arms outstretched. As he made contact, the bright light immersed him, swallowing him whole. But just as quickly, it flickered. He felt a jolt, like electricity coursing through his body. Instead of comfort, he was met with an overwhelming sense of dread. Suddenly, the light flickered off, plunging him back into darkness. Fear gripped his throat. He spun around, breath hitching. The howling echoed louder now, as if an entire pack was on his heels. Desperation clawed at his mind. He needed to get out of here. He felt heat from the glowing stone beneath him. It was warm, radiant. Could it offer some kind of protection? Without thinking, he scrambled to take shelter behind it, pressing himself against the rough surface. The sound of growls morphed into a cacophony, voices whispering his name. "Jack! Jack!" A terrifying realization took hold. Those voices were familiar. "Mark! Sarah!" he shouted, panic coating his words. "Help me!" But there was no answer, just the deafening roar of the darkness beyond. The shadows swirled, creeping closer, and he felt an icy chill grip his heart. It wasn't just the darkness he feared, it was what the darkness brought with it. The whispers grew louder, a frenzied chant pushing against the walls of his mind, spiraling into chaos. They taunted him, pulling at his deepest insecurities. Images flashed before him of Sarah's terrified face and Mark's desperate attempt to pull him from danger. He felt their fear press against him like a weight. "Get away from me!" Jack shouted into the void, but the voices only laughed. They fed on his fear, and the shadows that pursued him were not just beasts, they were manifestations of his own doubts. In that moment of despair, the ground beneath him shuddered violently, sending a shockwave coursing through his body. The stone vibrated, and for an instant, everything stopped. A shadow just beyond the edge flickered and then lunged forward. Jack's heart seized, and instinct kicked in. He hurled himself toward the tunnel's mouth just as something cold and slimy brushed against his ankle. He wasn't alone. He dove down the narrow opening, the darkness swallowing him once again. The scraping sound grew frantic as he crawled, fingers clawing at the dirt around him. He could feel the presence behind him, something monstrous lurking, angry for its prey. The tunnel curved sharply, and Jack pushed through, determined to escape, to find light, to find his friends. But the cries above, the lurking shadows, it all surged within him, boiling to the surface. That he saw it, the light again. This time so bright, so inviting. But at that moment, the howls intensified, rising to a crescendo that split the air. Jack felt a deep dread anchor him in place. He risked a look back, and what he saw sent an icy grip through his veins. Shadows loomed, twisted forms pushing out of the darkness, their eyes glowing, anger vibrating around them like thunder. Jack had to decide, push forward into the blinding light or turn back to confront the darkness behind him. The choice weighed heavily on his mind as he felt the shadow's breath against his neck. He couldn't stay. He wouldn't. Please, help me. He screamed, throwing himself toward the light while the shadows closed in behind him. Back above, Mark and Sarah stood frozen at the edge of the pit, eyes wide with terror. The forest wasn't just alive, it breathed chaos, and now they sensed the darkness that had engulfed Jack. They exchanged a horrified glance, fully grasping what self-preservation meant. "Mark, we can't leave him," Sarah cried, panic constricting her voice as they strained to hear any signs of Jack. But the night resumed its sinister howl, and the forest whispered their deepest fears. "Do we follow him? What if he has already?" The ground shook violently again, and the trees around them groaned as if responding to some dark command. Something unholy stirred beneath, and they could no longer delay. "Together," Mark said, steeling himself. They had to delve into the pit before it swallowed Jack whole, but what they would find once they descended into the abyss was the unknown. Would they emerge if they dared to try? Jack felt a pull, a yanking force that dragged him deeper and deeper into the light. He gasped as it enveloped him, the heat almost unbearable. With one final surge, he broke through the threshold. But instead of warm sunshine, he landed hard on a cold, unforgiving stone floor. A jarring pain shot through his body, and he flew backward, hitting his head against the rough surface. Dazed, he blinked rapidly, trying to shake off the dark blur encroaching on his vision. When he focused again, he found himself in a vast chamber, the walls pulsating with that same otherworldly glow he had chased. Shadows danced at the edges of the light, their shapes morphing and contorting, whispering secrets he couldn't understand. The air was damp and heavy, he could taste the metallic tang on his tongue. Jack, the whisper curled around him, sending shivers up his spine. "Mark? Sarah?" He called out, but his voice echoed back like a fading memory, swallowed by whatever this place was. Panic clawed at him as he scrambled to his feet. The walls felt alive, watching, breathing. Distant sounds reached his ears, a mixture of growls and cries. Jack stumbled toward them, but each step felt like he was wading through thick syrup. The shadows writhed, reacting to his every movement, and every time he glanced quickly over his shoulder, he half expected to see them lunging at him. "Mark! Sarah!" He shouted one more time, desperate for a response. Nothing but silence. But then, from the corner of his eye, he spotted a flicker of light. It was faint, barely there, but it pulsed with an urgency that pulled him forward. Did it promise safety, or was it just another lure? As Jack moved cautiously toward the light, the growls grew louder. The shadows twisted, inching toward him as if sensing his fear. He quickened his pace, heart racing. Adrenaline flooded his system, and the shadow's hunger vibrated through the chamber. "Get away from me!" he yelled, feeling the walls close in. Then he crashed into the edge of the light. It radiated warmth, an almost tangible force that seemed to shield him from the encroaching darkness. He turned, heart in his throat, to face the shadows. They halted just beyond the light's reach, their eyes glinting like diamonds in the night. "Turn back, Jack," they whispered in unison, voices dripping with malice. "You don't belong here." "Shut up!" he shouted, hands clenched, desperation giving way to fury. "I'm not scared of you." But deep inside, dread crawled through his gut, churning like a storm. He knew they fed on fear, his fear. He had to firm his resolve. Suddenly, a violent tremor rocked the ground. The walls quaked, the shadows shrieked, and Jack could feel the pull of the darkness, tugging at him, yanking him away from the light. No! Not again. He pressed against the wall of warmth, but the darkness encroached. He could sense it, could feel the icy breath of the shadows wrapping tightly around his throat. What if he got dragged back into the abyss, never to see Mark or Sarah again? He couldn't let that happen. He had to find a way to fight back. With that thought, he reached within himself, grabbing onto a flickering hope. The shadows hesitated for a brief moment, confusion mingling with rage in their glowing eyes. Then he felt it, an unexpected strength surged through him, igniting a flame in his chest. "Not today!" he shouted, stepping forward, channeling his fear into defiance. "You won't take me." As if repelled by his words, the shadows recoiled, and fragments of their forms disintegrated into the air, dissolving like smoke in the wind. But the ground continued to quake, and Jack sensed a power shift, something deeper awakening in the darkness beyond. Across the chamber, another passage appeared, shrouded in shadow but tinged with that iridescent light. It beckoned him, promising answers or more danger. Jack glanced over his shoulder at the shadows, now writhing in frustration, and made his choice. He sprinted toward the passage, heart hammering, daring to hope for the first time. Would it lead him to his friends, or deeper into a nightmare? Every nerve tingled with fear as he crossed into the darkness. Meanwhile, Mark and Sarah stood at the edge of the pit, caught in a whirlwind of indecision and dread. The ground trembled again, the trees shivered as if sensing some catastrophic change unfolding below. What if we can't get him back? What if it's too late? Sarah's voice quavered, her grip tightening around Mark. He looked deep into her eyes, determination swimming against the tide of fear. "We have to go. We can't leave him to face this alone. He needs us." Together, they took a step toward the pit's gaping maw, a foreboding void that promised the unfathomable. What if we lose him for good? What if we're next? But as they peered into the abyss, something glimmered in the darkness. "What is that?" Mark said, voice barely a whisper. A flicker of light, alive and pulsing, danced just below the surface, tempting them to leap. The urge to rescue their friend ignited a flame of hope. But would it be enough? As they drew closer, reality twisted, and the unknown loomed before them. The choice was theirs: leap into the unknown or turn away and hope they made it out alive. Which path would they choose? Jack plunged deeper into the darkness of the passage, a sensation of weightlessness taking him as he felt himself slipping. The shadows clawed at him, their chilling fingers grasping for his ankles, but he pushed forward. "Keep moving," he urged himself, breath quickening. His heart thundered in his chest as the chill of despair loomed close, a ghostly reminder of the stakes involved. His friends depended on him. The passage twisted and turned, narrowing until he was forced to squeeze through a gap that scraped against his skin, puncturing the urgency with pain. The glow pulsed ahead like a heartbeat, and he would not let it slip away. He would not be swallowed by this nightmare. Emerging into another chamber, Jack staggered forward and nearly fell. This space felt different, the air crackled with energy. Flickers of that same eerie light danced along the walls, and at the center, a large stone altar stood, etched with strange symbols that writhed as if alive. "Jack," the whisper drifted through the air, more urgent, more intimate. It sent a chill down his spine. "Mark?" he called, voice trembling but filled with determination. The shadows receded, hesitating, revealing flickering forms, snippets of memories. He couldn't tell. But waiting too long would mean inviting danger back into his fragile bubble of safety. At the altar, a shard of light flashed, a radiant beam shooting upwards, illuminating the chamber in an ethereal glow. For a heartbeat, Jack caught glimpses of reflections. He saw himself, Mark, and Sarah, laughing by a campfire, the warmth wrapping around them like a cocoon. Then darkness flashed back, and the laughter faded, replaced by an echoing cry, "Save us, Jack!" Fear clenched his gut tighter. The shadows surged again, forming shapes that seemed to mock him, feeding on his dread. "You can't save them," they hissed. "They are lost and oh," he shouted, voice breaking through the deafening whispers. "I want to let you win." Drawing upon every ounce of courage, Jack lunged toward the altar. Its light pulsed in sync with his heartbeat, resonating with something deep within him. At that moment, a whirlwind of energy shot through the chamber. It wrapped around him, filling every crevice with warmth. The shadows shrieked, recoiling from the light like roaches scattering away from the sun. Boom! Suddenly, a crash echoed in the chamber, the walls trembling threateningly. Jack turned, eyes widening as chunks of stone fractured, revealing more shadows lurking beyond. Panic ignited inside him as he realized these weren't just echoes, they were phantoms, trapped souls crying out for release, and they were breaking free. "Jack!" A voice screamed from within the shadows. It was Mark. He was here. "Hold on!" Jack shouted, urging against the swirling chaos, clinging to the light radiating from the altar. "I'm coming!" With a burst of determination, he charged forward, racing into the darkness as the air thickened around him. But the figures began to surge, twisting violently as they danced toward him and Mark, hungry for despair. The ground shook furiously, and as Jack lunged deeper into the shadows, his body slammed against an unseen force. He was caught, held firm as if caught in a web. "No! Let me go!" he cried, desperation creeping in. He had to fight against the abyss, he had to save his friends. But the shadows tightened their grip, pulling him further into the dark embrace. "Fight it!" He could hear his own voice encouraging him through the din. Meanwhile, Mark and Sarah stared, transfixed, at the pit. "We've got to go," Mark insisted, stepping forward into the void, heart pounding. "We can't lose him. What if we don't come back?" Sarah's eyes shone with fear but lit with determination. She felt an unseen bond to Jack, stronger than the dread. "Then let us make it count," Mark yelled, seizing her arm, compelling her forward. They wouldn't leave him, they'd risk it all. They leaped into the darkness, the light reaching for them like a beckoning hand, igniting the air with sizzling energy. As they fell, a rush of wind enveloped them, and they screamed in unison, the chasm engulfing their cries. Would they manage to join Jack in time, or would they be yanked into the same vale of despair? The walls echoed their resolve, but the shadows stirred restlessly, sensing fresh fear and craving more souls. The race against darkness had only just begun. Jack struggled against the tightening grip of shadows, feeling the cold seep into his bones. Panic clawed at him, a frantic animal trying to escape the encroaching darkness. "I want to give up," he screamed, summoning every shred of willpower left. The light from the altar pulsed brightly, a heartbeat filled with dare and hope. At the same time, the shadows twisted and turned, forming grotesque silhouettes that loomed larger. Their whispers grew louder, a cacophony flooding his mind with visions of despair, the haunting cries of his friends pressing against his consciousness like iron weights. "Help! Jack!" Mark's voice was piercing, fingernails scraping against the pull of the abyss. Jack felt a flicker of recognition deep within the chaos. He had to focus. He had to pull them all through together. Outside the looming shadows, Sarah grasped Mark's arm, her face drenched in determination yet fear. "We can't lose him," she urged, stepping forward, her trust in Jack shining through her panic. "We have to fight." In a single, synchronized motion, they leaped toward the dark embrace, feeling the very fabric of the world shift around them. "Take my hand," Sarah yelled, reaching for the thickening shadows as they accelerated, wrapping her arms around Mark, her pulse thrumming like a drum against the terror that soared around them. A blinding light erupted as they broke through, spilling out and colliding onto the stone floor, breathless and bewildered. Jack found himself sprawled beneath the altar, its power reverberating through him. Mark. Sarah. He shot up, cradled by that primal glow. They were here. But where? The shadows shifted nearby, ravenous, eager. He felt their hunger draw him in, draining warmth and hope as though awaiting their moment to devour the beam of light. Jack. Mark rasped, scrambling to his feet. We found you. No time to celebrate. Sarah shouted, scanning the swirling shadows. We have to move. The air grew colder, thicker, wrapping around their legs. Jack fought back, stepping toward the altar instinctively, its glow offering a soft shield against the oncoming dark. But the shadows dimmed the intensity, unveiling their ghastly faces, twisted remnants of the souls trapped before. Save us, they cried. Each plea sank into Jack's heart like a dagger, twisting deep. You have the power. They reached for him, skeletal hands stretching through the murkiness. No. Jack roared, fury igniting something fierce within him. I want to let you take them. The altar seemed to answer, its light surging as if fueled by his will, sending a pulse that vibrated through the chamber. Jack. It's too strong. Mark shouted over the howls, struggling against the pull, but it was too late. Jack could feel the essence of the past bleed into him. He staggered, bewildered by memories that weren't his own, dreams of laughter, warmth, and companionship vanishing into darkness. Each soul that reached for him cried out, forming an invisible net that tightened around his heart. Together. Jack lunged back, grabbing Mark and Sarah by the shoulders. They faltered in the tide of despair but steadied their resolve. If they could pull together, if they could cast away the shadows of doubt, they might survive. Suddenly, a flash of insight struck Jack. The altar was more than just a beacon, it was a conduit. We can send them back. He shouted, refocusing on the light. The shadows screamed, their cries crescendoing, distorting the air around them. As Jack placed his hands on the altar, he felt warmth flood through his fingertips, pulling them closer. We have to channel it. Mark and Sarah held tightly, each confused but willing to trust. Igniting the bond they shared, they pressed on, forging a connection that ignited fleeting flashes of hope, echoing memories of home. Yet, darkness loomed. The shadows danced wildly, spiraling toward them with relentless hunger. Jack felt the horrid weight of despair settling around them, threatening to crush him, suffocate them. Time itself felt like a ticking bomb. They had to act, or they might all be lost forever within this twisted realm. Trust each other. Jack shouted, their hands merging with warmth and purpose, turning back to the throbbing light, and preparing to confront the very essence of despair that wanted them trapped forever. But would they succeed? Or would the shadows devour their hope before they could break free? As the darkness surged closer, heartbeats quickened, and the altar glimmered ominously behind them. A desperate battle had just begun, with the fate of their souls hanging by a thread. Jack, Mark, and Sarah stood at the edge of the altar's glow, feeling its warmth compete against the chill creeping closer. The cacophony from the shadows swelled louder, their wails rising like a suffocating fog. Panic clawed at Jack's throat. His instincts screamed at him to run, but he couldn't abandon his friends, not now, not ever. Can you feel it? Mark gasped, his eyes wide with fear. They're trying to pull us down. The shadows twisted, their ghastly figures contorting in agony, grotesque mouths lined with razor-like teeth, longing for a taste of their fear. Jack could feel the frigid breath of death sliding around him, almost tangible. We have to hold on. Sarah shouted, gripping Jack's arm. Her knuckles were white. We can't let them win. Drawing strength from their bond, Jack focused again on the pulsing light. It was still there, fierce and unyielding. We need to channel all our strength into it. Jack shouted, intertwining their fingers. The light shimmered with their desperate will, breathing life into their fearful hearts. "No!" bellowed a shadow, the sound echoing off stone walls, vibrating deep in their bones. "You cannot escape us." The shadows lunged toward them, their forms shifting violently. Jack felt a rush of fear flood through him, nearly paralyzing. But then, in the depths of that growing terror, a spark ignited. "Now!" he cried out, feeling the altar's pulse sync with their holding hands. They pressed forward, shoulder to shoulder, focusing on that blinding light. The radiant energy grew, pushing against the encroaching dark as if the very air itself thickened with purpose. Jack could see the shadows recoil, the very fabric of their darkness warping, giving way. It was working. "Keep going," Mark encouraged, but doubt tinged his voice. Suddenly, the shadows coalesced into a singular figure, massive and ominous, shaped from the deepest nightmares Jack could imagine. "You cannot hope to challenge the void." The figure roared, its voice like thunder. Wind whipped through the chamber, tearing at their clothes, trying to rip them apart. Cold tendrils of darkness swept across the altar like snakes, wrapping around Jack's arms, clutching desperately. The touch was like ice, draining. "Fight it!" Sarah cried, her voice trembling. Jack could see her determination, even as tears slid down her cheeks. "Together!" Jack echoed, a mantra of defiance. With their joined concentration, the white light brightened, slicing through the gray haze and illuminating the phantom figure. Jack felt waves of warmth surge through him as he channeled every fiber of his being. Memories of laughter, friendship, the simplicity of warmth merged into the light. But with every hit of warmth, the shadows retaliated, a wave of despair crashing against them. "You will return to us." The figure screamed, pulling back, then rushing forward as if to consume them whole. Pain exploded in Jack's chest. He staggered, gasping. "We can't stop now. We are stronger together," he shouted, vision blurring, heart pounding painfully against his ribcage. He could feel them slipping, could sense the shadows gaining ground. As terror threatened to swallow him whole, a flash of inspiration struck. "Mark. Sarah. Focus on a memory that gives you strength. Think of something that makes you feel alive." Mark shut his eyes tightly. "Home," he shouted, "summer nights, barbecues, laughter with friends. Family." Sarah blurted, tears streaming down her face, "All the birthdays and smiles that fill my heart." Those words ignited something explosive within Jack. "Then let it flow," he roared, channeling their memories into the light, amplifying their strength as he felt the shadows reel back. But just as they seemed to gain ground, the abyss erupted. The shadows surged anew, an unreadable force, snaking toward them, ready to consume. "Jack!" Mark screamed, his voice a mixture of fear and resolve. Just then, the dark figure lunged, reaching for Jack, a monstrous grin stretching wide. "Not again. I won't let you take me," Jack bellowed, cranking up the energy of the glowing light. The results were explosive. As the shadows thrashed wildly, fighting against the pulse of hope, but suddenly a terrifying truth revealed itself. The altar pulsed erratically, about to shatter from the immense pressure of their struggle. "It's going to blow," Sarah shouted, eyes wide with horror. Would they harness the power of the light before the shadows crushed them? Would the altar hold as the shadows drew closer, threatening to drag them all into their inescapable horror? As the darkness circled them like a predator, a final battle brewed, and Jack realized that the ultimate exchange awaited him, a choice between saving himself or saving them all. In the fray of that raspy darkness, Jack felt like he was standing on a precipice, the shadows swirling around him, whispering promises laced with despair. The howls of lost souls mixed with the thundering darkness, overpowering every flicker of hope that surged within him. In that moment, the shadows threatened to swallow them whole, feeding on the scraps of fear and uncertainty that lingered in the air. But then a spark ignited deep inside, fueled by the memories they all shared. Their laughter, their friendship, the warmth of campfires and the joy of simply being together, all those moments collided into a blazing resolve. "We're not giving up," Jack shouted, channeling every ounce of his determination toward the pulsing light of the altar. "We'll fight together." Mark and Sarah nodded, their fear turning into a collective strength that flowed between them like an electric charge. They held tightly to one another, letting the intensity of their bond overpower the oppressive shadows closing in. With one strong breath, they focused together, arms raised toward the light, willing it to grow. "Home!" Mark yelled out again, his heart pounding as he thought of summer nights spent with friends, laughter ringing in the air, warmth enveloping them like a second skin. "Family!" Sarah echoed, spilling the memories of unity and love that transcended the darkness surrounding them. The altar responded, a surge of brilliant light erupting from its core, piercing through the shrouded figures dancing at the edges of sanity. Shadows contorted, shrieking in a sudden frenzy, as if the light were a scorching flame igniting the very fabric of their existence. "It's working!" Jack yelled, voice trembling with renewed hope. "We can push them back." The shadows writhed and screamed, a cacophony of anguish that felt almost deafening. And yet, the bond between them, Jack, Mark, and Sarah, seemed to grow stronger with each pulse of energy. The altar became a beacon, throwing off waves of light that cut through the darkness like a knife. Jack's heart swelled with the realization that their connection was their greatest weapon against the void, but the grotesque figure commanding the shadows lunged forward, gaping maw filled with razor teeth glistening in the light. "You cannot escape your fate," it howled, barreling toward them like a freight train. "No!" Jack screamed, sensing the urgency building within him. He could feel the altar's protective energy begin to weaken, shadows closing in like an insatiable tide. "We won't let you take us. We are stronger together." With that proclamation, a wave of collective energy swept through them, and Jack reached closer to the altar, willing his will to merge with Mark and Sarah's. "For our memories," he shouted, and as the words left his lips, the light exploded outward, expanding in a dazzling array that lit up the entire chamber, and there it was, the shadows, swirling and angry, but now they stumbled back as if struck by an invisible force, their haunting sounds fading into whispers. They clawed at each other, fighting against the radiant energy that surged from the altar, but it was no use. The light was too bright, too pure to remain contained any longer. "Let them go!" Jack bellowed, the words echoing with fierce determination. And just like that, the shadows dissipated, sucked back into the rolling darkness as the pulsating light refused to yield. With one final surge, Jack felt an intense flood of energy pour from the altar, sweeping them into the light. They were lifted, suspended above the swirling chaos, the shadows screeching in angry despair as they faded from existence. In a heartbeat, Jack, Sarah, and Mark tumbled back straight into the safety of the forest. They landed with a thud in a clearing, gasping for breath. The familiar sounds of rustling leaves and soft night echoes surrounded them, blending into the calmness that followed the chaos. And there beneath the stars, they were whole again, the oppressive weight of dread lifted. Jack looked around, half expecting shadows to linger in the corners of his vision. But there was nothing, only the gentle rustle of trees and the soft glow of the moon. "Did we do it?" Sarah gasped, her eyes wide with disbelief and relief. She hugged herself, part reality, part disbelief that they had escaped the nightmare. Somewhere deep inside, a trembling fear echoed in Jack's heart. "I think we did. We fought off the darkness. Together." Mark grinned, his breath coming in shaky bursts of triumph. "We made it. We're okay." But even as they exchanged hopeful glances, an unsettling realization washed over them all. They had encountered something ancient and hungry, something that may always linger just beyond the light. They stood there for a moment, enveloped in the cool night air, letting the reality of their survival seep in. Silence filled their space, the weight of their experience settling like a dense fog. With newfound determination, they began the trek back to their car, hearts lighter but still aware of the shadows they narrowly evaded. The forest was alive with sounds, but confidence danced within them, an unbreakable bond forged in darkness, a reminder of their own light. "No more camping for me," Mark laughed, though the humor felt bittersweet, tempered by the shadows of the night. Jack and Sarah joined in the laughter, a cleansing sound of relief that echoed through the trees, symbolic of their survival over something that wanted nothing more than to take. Yet, in their hearts, a collective knowing remained. Darkness lingers, but inside of them, flickers of resolve and a bond unbreakable stood resilient against whatever would come next. They made a pact in that moment, an unspoken vow to face any challenge as a team, forever vigilant of the shadows but steadfast against the void. As they disappeared down an unfamiliar path, the trees whispered gently behind them, the night filled with secrets that would remain, haunting their memories and their laughter. And then they were gone, leaving the forest alone, cradling the echoes of what was and the promise of what might still come. This story may be over, but don't let it end here. You need to subscribe now so you don't miss any more exclusive tales like this. Smash that like button to fuel this adventure and help us keep the stories coming. Flood the comments section below with your reactions and theories. What do you think happens next? And for the love of all things good, share this video with at least 5 friends who need a thrill tonight. This is the moment to show your support. Don't hesitate, because the true fans know just how vital these actions are.